Tobago who give started the privilege just to find out who I am after the middle passage. So it's my obligation to make sure the Twin Island that how I keep it, I could leave it in a better condition, so that I can wait on no PM, no opposition or no party. You see, I got to do the little that I could do, and do it wholeheartedly for the country. So jump on the TV and tell me to take out Gary. Since I'm small again, tea and kettle shedding. Every day what's up people begging, water wasting. So when I look up the water, I stop my parents from wasting. It's energy and tech people who want that I helping. Because it goes to teach of my country to make sun always bright. That none of them people they run down the river dry. Dry, dry. When they go home, standing the privilege, just to find back myself after the middle passage. So it's my obligation to make sure the Twin Island that how I keep it, so I could leave it in a better condition, so that I can wait on no PM, no opposition or no party. You see, I got to do the little that I could do, and do it wholeheartedly for the country.
Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to Eye on Dependency right here on I-95.5 FM, live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel. Good morning, Natasha.
Good morning, Garth. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Happy Sunday to you. And thank you for joining us on I-95.5 FM, as well as our YouTube channel and Facebook page.
And we have again in studio, once again, the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Fitzgerald Hinds, and he who has kindly consented to sit with us here again this morning to continue where we left off last Sunday and to educate you even more on some of the things that you may not know, and of course to bring you up to date on things to come. Good morning, Minister, and thank you very much for joining us.
A very good morning to you, Mr. Sinclair, and your wife, Natasha. A very good morning to you, Brother Tom, and all of the viewers and listeners out there. Happy to be in your company again, as we began last week.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Ably assisted by communications person, Miss
Claxton.
Miss Claxton. Yes, Miss Claxton, thank you very much for joining us as well this morning. So, Minister, let's jump right into it. And I see that as people expect, the Defense Force and Protective Services they're always seeking to boost their manpower, and they encourage young citizens to participate in the recruitment drive. How has that been going? How have they been faring? How did they fare in 2022, and what are the plans for recruiting?
Thank you very much. Well, the business of government, there's a process. People are identified, recruited by different agencies. In this case, you're talking about the protective services.
Yes.
They have a mandate which includes recruitment. You have the natural attrition situation on an annual basis. There are persons who would have reached the age of retirement,
right,
or for other reasons would DMIT office, and therefore recruitment is an ongoing process. Of course, it is a very important one because these organizations, whether it's the Defense Force, the police, the fire, immigration, they have, based on the policy that they are guided by, a very sound idea as to what they want in a soldier, a police officer, a fire officer, and such like, prison officer and such like. Right. So the training process is designed to transform this civilian, this person, into the profession and to get them ready to serve adequately in it. It's, as you know, in all recruitment, it's a very serious business, and therefore there are some basic requirements. Typically for the police and for the prison and for the defense force, it requires basic CXC passes, and then they are vetted and they are interviewed, found suitable, and then they are brought in for respective periods of training, basic training, and then they go out into the larger areas to do the business. Recently, we have been finding that a lot of the persons, not so recent, it has always been the case, quite frankly, but I am at the desk now and I'm paying particular attention to it. There are too many of our persons who are coming in the job, and in some cases, of course, already in, who are demonstrating ways and behaviors that go contrary to the law, contrary to the ethic, contrary to what is expected by the taxpayers of the country who pay them to provide this public service. Yes. And therefore, that is a major issue. So we have, as a matter of policy, directed the heads of these organizations that the business of vetting, because it became very clear that there are some cases where proper vetting was not done. So I have been demanding far more effective vetting of applicants for these jobs. I myself, at some stage in my life, was one of them. And while I was going through the recruitment process as a police for the police service, I was very much aware that they were sending people in my community to speak to people who knew me, the shopkeeper, the police officer living in the area, the soldier living in the area. And I would hear that people tell me somebody was asking about you. So I was mindful of that. Right. More of that has to be done. Of course, there are different ways in which they do it today. And so we are in the business of recruiting. The Defense Force, for example, recruited and passed out about 3 batches since I'm minister. Right. And as you know, you and I had discussions about aspects of that profession, you having come out of it yourself. And I'm very happy to share with the public that you are right now engaged in some of that on-the-job training with some of these officers in respect of certain issues around drugs in particular, because we have had cases of officers falling prey to drugs themselves. We have had cases of officers using their office to transport, using equipment of the state to transport and to traffic and to get involved. Criminality, actually, let me put it plainly, and therefore the education that we have asked you through your organization to provide, coming from a place of absolute knowledge and experience with it, I consider to be very valuable. So altogether, recruitment is an ongoing thing, identification of the right persons, proper vetting, proper satisfaction that they are suitable for the job, and as we have said as a matter of policy, when you get into the job, if you demonstrate behaviors that are inimical, harmful, a threat, dangerous, illegal to the job, the commanders of all of these formations, all of the units of national security has, as a matter of government policy, been directed to the law and the constitution, and they are told to get them out.
Now, Minister, before we move on, I want to just make a little correction. Instead of, and we want to plant it in the public's mind, but that being a member of the Protective Service is a career and not a 9-to-5 job. Because some of them come and they think it's a job and they try to treat it like a job. And so I just wanted to and let the public know as well that you heard the minister speak about vetting. Now, some citizens in our country tend to think that the Protective Service is a babysitting agency or that can change people from their bad ways. So when people come around, just as you indicated, they came to your neck of the woods and they asked about you, there would be people in communities who wouldn't have absolute knowledge of youngsters who are on the wrong side.
And their families too.
And their families. And instead of being truthful with the vetting personnel, they would say, "Nah, that's a good boy," thinking that the military or the police or whatever can change them. And I want to put that out there now. It is not the case. If you know that a youngster is involved in illegal activities, be honest with the vetters and let them know that. And it will save you, the taxpayer, a lot of money.
You know, I met a youngster last week, or 2 weekends ago, in the Laventille area, in my constituency. A pretty young fellow. He's 16 years. He's taller than I am. Really beautiful and massive physique. And he tells me he wants to get into the Defense Force, the Army.
Right.
So I complimented him because my observation and my anecdotal wisdom, I have a good idea if somebody is using drugs of any sort. There are some signs, telltale signs. When I looked upon the youngster, I mean, he was really clean. He looked as though he hadn't had a beer in his life. Certainly not looking like one who would smoke or anything. His eyes were clean, his lips, his fingers, and looked healthy and beautiful. And I said to him, well, good. This is important because you are going to be drug tested if you are going to be approaching those people. And of course, during your time in service, you will be randomly tested depending on where you're working. And by the way, I have a bill before the Parliament now, which is designed to allow the state to carry out mandatory, involuntarily acquired drug and integrity testing, polygraphing, voice stress analysis, eye scanning, and all the other modern means of determining the truthfulness and the integrity. Now, this is not new to the world, and there are issues around it. The matter is before the Parliament for its consideration, and well, it's on the parliamentary agenda, and hopefully it will come before us for discussion and so on. So I told the youngster of whom I was just speaking that I want him to focus, he's at secondary school, on acquiring your 5 CXC passes minimum, including math and English, because we know these are the basic requirements. Yeah. So if you want to be something, and everything you want wants something, this thing you want, it wants you to get math, English, and 3 others, so focus on that. It wants you to be healthy, focus on that. It wants you to be drug-free, focus on that. It wants you to be a patriot, focus on that. In other words, when you're walking in the community and you see the fellas with the gun or the drugs or the fighting and the stupidity and their pettiness and their destructive and potentially destructive engagements, turn and walk far away from that. Yeah. And he understood that. And I say so to all of the young people today. Listen, there are opportunities in Mother Trinidad and Tobago. It is for you to reach out and touch. Don't be distracted. Know what you want. Give it what it wants, and you will get life's results. And I speak from a position of experience. I have told them 1,000 times. I failed my first attempt at SEA. It was then Common Entrance. I went to secondary school after passing it for the second time. I went to Belmont Intermediate, as it then was, now St. Francis College. I wrote 6 CXC subjects. I passed one of them with a grade 5. I was no scholar. Not that I did not have the ability on reflection. I can have done as well as all the other guys in my school who did quite well. But I was playful, I was having fun, I was distracted, I was unfocused, and I paid a price. Fortunately, in those days, to join the police service, it required school leaving qualification, which was up to the primary school level, and I had gone through secondary school, and they had a little mental test, a little dictation, and these things I walked through pretty easily, and I was among those who were recruited to join the police service. It was because you didn't require 5 passes. If it did, I would not have been like today. I ended up in the police service, and for the 7 years I spent in the police service, I left with 6 passes, 2 years into a 3-year program at John D in business management, which I completed in the insurance industry, having left the police service to go there. And today I am a lawyer. I have a law degree. I have a master's degree from the University of London with a merit mark. I was called to the bar at Middle Temple. And I have had many kinds of professional training and exposure over the last so many years. So I am saying to the young people out there, the opportunities are there. You just have to reach out and touch. Stay focused, stay drug-free. Don't get carried away. Don't let no gang leader, don't let no family member, don't let nobody pull you like no footstool and carry you down no rabbit hole. Just do the business.
Agreed.
No,
And the opportunities are there.
Natasha, excuse me. I don't know if you touched on this while I was out. There were people who were actually up in arms and thinking that we are losing a lot of potentially good soldiers and
Yes, I
police
was just going to
officers
speak about that.
because of this requirement for
academic requirement.
this academic requirement. Remember, as you said, back in the day, just out of school leaving, and you show up able-bodied, and and it was felt that you got more loyal and patriotic personnel from that group of people. But now that you have, you need this academic requirement, we think that it's sort of weakening the base. And the recruiting.
Well, I think
the
you can
personnel
have
that you
people
get.
with academic qualification and at the same time have the character and the characteristics that these jobs
Right.
require.
Right.
Because today the world is different. Today, the police service, the defense force has to possess necessarily a whole number of different skill sets.
Yes.
So there's no gainsaying that academic and technical skills and qualification are not important. They are certainly very important. But I believe you can find, and the training is designed to instill, and all of the youth programs we have, the school system ought to be teaching it. It ought to be taught in the family, so that these good, strong characters that you have identified outside of academics could be had alongside the qualification. It can be had. For example, when I was the Minister of Youth Development and National Service, we began to work on the thing. If these youngsters come out of the youth camp with technical training in agriculture and woodworking and welding and what have you, we felt that they spent 2 years in there. If you make that 2.5 years or 3 years, then in addition to those technical acquisitions, they can also do some academic development and can as well leave with 6 passes.
Right.
So it's possible. But I take your point that what is important equally, or perhaps even more important, is the character, the attributes of patriotism and honesty and dignity and service and wanting to help human beings rather than to distress them. Those are the issues. So we are trying to find that, and the Ministry of Youth Development is pushing all of the youth programs, national service, which really highlights the importance of patriotism and those kinds of attributes that I have just described. Something to tell you that, look here, to whom much is given, much is expected, and if you are sworn as a soldier or as a police officer, you can't embarrass the colors. You have to live up to what is expected, because the citizen expects something more of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can't be watching a uniform and you tell yourself, well, there's only a uniform and there's a criminal inside of it. This has happened.
Yes.
And I did hear last night at the induction of the principal at the UWI St. Augustine campus, Professor Rosemary Belantwine. I attended her induction ceremony, and in her very wide-ranging and potent address to the gathering last night, she did say she is wanting to focus on matriculating persons, not necessarily only on the basis of academic criteria, but certainly on other criteria. So it ties in with what you are saying.
Right.
And I felt some warmth towards the idea, because yes, people have different kinds of skills. There's a view that if you want people in the Coast Guard and so on, they have some fellas living all on the beach lines of
That's
this
right.
country who know the sea,
That's
who
right.
could
Back of
swim,
their hand,
who know all
yes.
the little nuances of
Yes,
these things, and they
yes.
can bring value to the organization.
The guys in the
you
country.
they may not have the 5 passes, but you can bring them into the organization, train them sufficiently,
Right.
and put them on the job. I would not be opposed to things like that.
Because remember, you have country, as we call them countrymen, who know the bush like the back of their hands, and that's the kind of soldier that you need.
But it cannot be that just because somebody is your grandson or your nephew or your partner, he ended up in the job and these things. So there are some standards that we have to maintain, and well, it's a work in progress.
Because if you're just joining us, folks, you're listening to Dependency, and we are joined this morning again by the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Fitzgerald Hinds, and we taking us through the paces here this morning.
Do you think it's a good time, Garth, for us to show that video about Mylat? I think it would fit in well to the conversation that we're having in terms of recruiting and also training up young people in certain disciplines that will not just assist them if they want to join the military or paramilitary services, but in life.
Right, we'll cover that, and then we'll move on.
So
short man, video F.
man, yes, let's share this video, which
This is a testimony, Minister, from a mother who sent her child to Mylat.
yes.
And I want you parents out there to listen to this.
My name is Afisha Gabriel. When my son came home, I was very amazed to see how changed he has become. And in the morning, he makes his bed and he folds his clothes. His child never fold clothes in his life. And he folds clothes better than me. And he goes outside and he exercises. He does all what he has learn from you all. He washes his own clothes in a bucket on the joking board. I was amazed. I just was baffled because I looking at my son, I was like, this is not my son. My son was, lazy, playing game. I washing his clothes. I was doing everything for him. But now he does everything for himself. And he's respectful and he's more calm. He doesn't get upset quickly. And I am so happy that I made this decision for him to join the Mylat program, and I am very, very, very happy to see a complete change around with him. Even the way how he treats his girlfriend, he's different. I want to commend instructors for doing an awesome job on all our boys, all the cadets, and to continue doing what you're all doing to making our boys' life different, for them to be better individuals and better people in society.
There we go. And I can understand that. To this very day, and I'm sure you too, you have it all over you, Mr. Garth. I'm sure you can't put on your shoes where you put your shoes down the way you wear them. Heels together, toes apart, kind of a thing.
Witness.
Yeah. You can't see a towel just hanging over something, so it has to be well folded.
Yes.
These are the things that, I know the story, you know what I mean? You can't bear untidiness around you.
Yes.
Dirty wares in the sink and all them things is provoking your spirit.
Yes.
And this is what I tried to explain to Natasha.
In a cadet camp, when we went to school as cadets, as boys, in a cadet camp, you start the morning with what we call fatigue, cleaning your environment.
That's
in the
right.
police service, the first item on the agenda when you get up is to clean.
Fatigue.
And down the center of the dormitory had a polished portion that you can't walk on. You could only polish it. If you were seen on that, it was a crime. So it was order. When the instructors come in the dormitory and they stand up, they look down the bunk, they have to see all the pillows in the same line, the sheets folded a certain way, tucked in, and they don't come to, they look for faults, Them bad instructors, So this is what the youngster is going through. His mother wouldn't know all of that, but he's maturing. He's understanding what order and discipline internally driven is. Look at the cadet force, of which I was a part. I played under 14 football in school, a little thing at cricket, but the cadets is what really gained my attention. And I made it to the second highest rank in the cadet force in the school. I left as a sergeant. And the cadet force was established in 1910 in this country. It is now, therefore, 112 years old.
Yep.
It was established when we became independent by an act of parliament in 1963, I think it was. And the mission statement of the cadet force, it exists to give mental, moral, and physical training to young persons, and so to form character of each to enable them to start well in life and to develop in them the principles of patriotism and good citizenship. Thus will be brought out qualities of self-confidence. And let me just pause before I continue there. You talk about pride and self-confidence. When I wore those 3 stripes or any stripes, I mean, I don't want to tell you all this story, it was a rough road. But when I did, the level of pride, and when I walked into the police service coming from the cadet force, the instructors immediately saw in me, I had something that the average boy didn't have, and therefore they saw in me a future instructor in the police service, and I went on to become an instructor. My instructor, Sergeant Edwards, as he then was, he left as a senior soup, but he gave me the honor to move my squad, to drill from right behind the entrance of the barracks there, the guard room. Our dormitory was down there. To take the squad up to the barrack square on a regular basis, and you could hear me, Sergeant Hinds now.
Back in.
He Sergeant, I Sergeant too. Left, right, left, and we're going up the road. And passing out there, he gave me the honor in our white tunics to bring the squad up as well. My father stand up and watch me. I mean, pride.
That's goosebump. That's a goosebump moment. You know that, right?
And the roles and functions of the cadet force, I was saying self-confidence, self-respect, and ability to face and accept responsibility with power to control themselves and to direct others. The roles and functions of the cadet force, very similar to what you see in my lad there, is to produce patriotic, productive citizens who contribute positively to the national community, to assist the civil authorities in times of crisis and disaster. In all crises in this country, the cadet force comes out. And 1990, 1970, and they do provide some support, and to perform ceremonial functions on behalf of the state. The cadet force is an arm of the Ministry of National Security. And as I said, it was established in 1910 in Queen's Royal College and St. Mary's, but then it spread out to many, many other schools across Trinidad and Tobago. It is part and accepted by the Ministry of Education. It is part of the school environment, and you have a whole long list here of schools all over Trinidad and Tobago with active cadet organizations, and I know this is one of the ways that we develop our young people, and many of them actually go on to join the fire service, the prison service, the police, because the seeds are built in you. When I was a cadet, I just wanted to be a soldier. But when the selection time came, I was not yet 18, so I missed it. I turned 18 on the 3rd of December. Their recruitment was, I think, in October. So I had to miss that. The police selected on the 8th of January. I went down on my mother's instructions, and I ended up in the police service. Absolutely no regrets, because the police service has proven to be the bedrock of everything that I am today. Everything that I am, I give credit to my foundation in the cadet force and the police service, where I really blossomed in terms of self-confidence, directing others, acting responsibly, and all of the things. As I say, I went on to become an instructor, and it really is the bedrock of everything else, discipline and what have you.
Thank you for joining us, folks. If you, for some reason you're having problems on the Facebook feed, join us on YouTube, EYEON Dependency on Facebook. On YouTube. Because from time to time the feed drops on Facebook. So let's go to that quick break. And when we come back, we have lots more for the minister to delve into. For instance, the ODPM and the counter trafficking unit, who has a new director as we speak. And of course, Miss Kimoy Williams is still there.
Thomas.
Kimoy, well, she's
Thomas
Williams now.
Okay.
Yes, Kimoy Thomas Williams. Right. So let's go to that break, folks, and we'll be back. Stay right there.
At Guardian Group, we've seen so many of our customers achieve great things. From key moments when together we've planned for the future to those unforgettable days when you've celebrated the rewards of those great decisions. So, it's no surprise that after 175 years, our optimism is stronger than ever. Because when you've partnered with people to achieve their best lives as long as we have, you tend to see the world a little brighter every day. Guardian Group. Live easy.
The sex trafficking thing, that's a serious thing, boy.
Sex trafficking? I thought it was only human trafficking it have.
But what do you mean?
No serious thing, boy. Where you get that from? I don't know about human trafficking, not about sex trafficking.
So how can you spot and identify perpetrators and children who are victims of trafficking? Many victims who are children do not look like under 18 years old. Child victims often move escorted around alone or in small groups. They also live in shared and even packed rooms and have very little clothing and belongings. Child victims are often seen with adults who are not their parents, their relatives, or their caregivers. Migrant children are often unaccompanied and separated from their parents. Child victims are often engaged in work that is not suitable for children. They are often deprived of their freedom to go to school, to play, and to enjoy being a child. Perpetrators have unexplained sources of income and possessions. They are businessmen and businesswomen running legitimate and illegitimate businesses. Perpetrators may appear to be the victim's friend, boyfriend, close relative, or employer.
We are the counter-trafficking unit of the Ministry of National Security Trinidad and Tobago, safeguarding human life.
$50 by 20, $50 by 25.
This is Kyron Pollard. When you play, do it the legal way. Don't bet on illegal gaming.
On Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on 95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
This is on Dependency, and we are speaking with the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Fitzgerald Hinds, and we just had opened the show with a really nice discussion about recruitment into the protective services, and of course bringing in the youth elements. I want to say the institutions that help prepare young men and women for life in the military and the protective services, like MILAT, like the Cadet Force, which everybody says, we should beef up and give more attention to. But these organizations are doing pretty well. MILAT in particular, I think, is doing human service with young people, young men in particular. And we look forward to the day when young women are afforded similar opportunities to have that kind of training and discipline. But we're moving on now in our conversation to another important arm of the ministry, which is the ODPM, Management of Disaster Preparedness and Relief. And the remit obviously is under the ODPM, and because of recent issues in the Caribbean with natural disasters and our assistance to neighboring countries like Barbados and St. Vincent, and of course the local issues that we've been having regarding flooding. Minister, can you speak to what the ODPM has been doing to boost our capability in terms of disaster management?
Before we go further, let me say that there are female cadets of the Trinidad and Tobago Cadet Force.
Of course.
And let me also say that I am aware that they are actively pursuing the introduction of females into those, the MILAT and those other programs.
Yep.
Well, as for the ODPM, which is also a part of the Ministry of National Security, the ODPM is a coordinating agency operating under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, responsible for the management of disasters and that kind of crisis in the country. It is for the moment led by a retired Major General Smart, who I am to say has impressed as a very focused professional, pushes real hard to get the business done. The ODPM would have come to bear in some of the recent flood crises that we had, and as I say, it's a coordinating agency. So typically the regional corporations are the first responders in all of this.
Yes.
And if they are overwhelmed by the crisis, then the ODPM then calls in some of the specialist agencies like the Defense Force and the Fire Service and so on. And where necessary, the police service to deal with aspects of the disaster. So it is a really effective organization. We only last week signed an MOU with the University of the West Indies, and again I had the company of the newly inducted principal of the St. Augustine campus. We established an MOU dealing not only with climate change issues, because, you know, in many developing societies and certainly developed societies, sensible societies, you rely on the technicians, you rely on the academics, you rely on the intelligentsia to guide the affairs of the society, just as you equally rely on the men and women of the cloth, the faith-based organizations to provide moral and spiritual leadership and guidance to your society.
Yeah.
And it is in societies, I lived in another for 7 years in England, and I've seen where they actually say, when you win the intellectual argument, the politics comes easy, because it should be logical and easy to persuade any reasonable thinking person that this is the correct logical approach to take in dealing with a problem.
Yes.
Because as I said last week, our job is really solving problems. You have a state, you have a constitution, you have laws, you have ministries, you have a governance structure, but problems will arise. So in order to make sure that the system works properly, you have to avoid the problems. Anyway, so we signed this MOU, and the ODPM did that, and it didn't confine itself to climate change, but a broader range of issues around national security in this MOU, so that we could collaborate with them for that kind of intellectual, as I say, leadership. And yesterday the principal indicated her favor with that kind of approach, and has committed the intelligentsia of the university to the work of the government, particularly through the ODPM and so on, and otherwise. So it's an ongoing thing. Personnel are trained, they conduct seminars and symposium. A high point of their activity every year in the month of May, there's a sensitization for the national community, where they carry around a caravan, public awareness caravan to different parts of the country, including Tobago, of course, and educate the people, to make the people more conscious of the impending disasters of all descriptions, and to be able to make the necessary personal, domestic, community preparations for it, knowing that the state will come to bear from a national or state perspective as required.
Yeah.
So we all have a responsibility, and ODPM does a very good job at sensitizing people, including all of the stakeholders. And therefore I'm satisfied that as one of the arms of national security, the ODPM is well-oiled, not a well-oiled criminal enterprise, as was used by a retired Court of Appeal judge recently, and quite appositely, I must say. But I have to be careful with my words, Next thing, they spend 2 weeks analyzing whether the word apposite is a proper word, and making bacchanal, Anyway, and it's a well-oiled organization, well-led, and it is playing its role in the context of national security and national well-being, more generally.
Appositely.
Indeed. Before we move off this topic, I would like you, Minister, just to quickly sort of explain to the public, because I think this point still does not come across effectively. That, I mean, you mentioned it more than once, that the ODPM is a coordinating agency. I think when things go wrong, it's very easy to point fingers at that agency because they are the lead coordinator. But if you can break down exactly how does disaster preparedness and relief fall into the oeuvre of national security, what is the connection there?
Well, the business of national security, and let me think. I tell you, the business of national security is public safety.
Yes.
And national or disasters, natural disasters, are a threat to public safety.
Right.
And therefore there's an obvious link. And the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management treats with the question of public safety in that context.
Gotcha.
And they are the coordinating agency, as we have already established. They know all the stakeholders, the fire service, the police service, the regional corporations, the Ministry of Social Development. They are working with these organizations all the time, and they simply direct and bring to bear each of them as a situation develops. As we say, the first responders will be the regional corporations,
yes,
and therefore the ODPM directs them based on its knowledge and experience and its international observation of best practices, because disasters don't only happen in Trinidad, we learn from other peoples. And they are encouraged to prepare to get the right equipment, to get the right training, to get the right staffing, to get the right techniques and technologies in order to be ready. And all of that the ODPM coordinates. And when the circumstances arise, then the corporations are expected to bring to bear this expertise and this equipment to treat with the situation. The Ministry of Social Development, the first responder team in the Ministry of in the regional corporations, they do the assessment of the loss and the damage on a house-to-house basis, on an individual basis. They feed that information up to the Ministry of Social Development, which now comes in to make good compensation and that sort of thing, or the Ministry of Agriculture, farmers and farmers' loss. Of course, inside of all of this, you have elements of corruption. We've seen recently where persons were charged for corruption in this crisis. Because they are opportunists, opportunistic hyenas,
Yes. And disasters are an opportunity for that kind of...
Yeah, and they falsify documents and they exaggerate claims and they do all kinds of things, and then they get help from some corrupt people inside us. So Minister Cox in the Ministry of Social Development found herself in the last 2 years having to establish an anti-corruption unit inside of the Ministry of Social Development. Because it has become clear that millions of taxpayers' dollars are stolen through those parts, So you will find these things are also bugbears. So, it's people.
Minister, could you repeat that? The
Ministry of Social Development has recently had to build up and hire a team to deal with fraud, skullduggery in the sum of millions of dollars on an annual basis. There are people who are dipping in to those, whether it's what we used to call old age pension, senior citizens grant. There are people who are dipping there every month, not entitled to it. There are people who dead for years and the family still collecting it, So we have just been working national security along with the Ministry of Social Development. Minister Cox is doing an excellent job in this regard to harden the target, to make it more impervious. Is that a
yes, impervious to corruption?
To make
yes,
it more impervious to corruption, because they corrupt everything in this place. So while you worried about disaster and Major General Smart dealing with it, it has camps who there just trying to see what they could glean from this. Anyway, this thing going on.
But I was telling someone who complained about the minister that Donald Cook yesterday, I said, you have to remember too that he was once National Security.
Yeah,
so she would approach the job from a different, yes.
Yeah. And we just signed an MOU with that ministry, Social Development and Family Services, to share certain information because we have to protect you, the taxpayers, because there are people who are dipping and double dipping.
And to protect the vulnerable among us for whom these grants and services are intended for.
That's really sad though. You know? And you will have senior citizens, mothers and fathers who encourage that.
And you know, this raises a question for me. Let me take the opportunity to say, last year, unfortunately, we lost 605 persons, homicides of various descriptions. We discussed it last week in that. And it stirs in my head, in my spirit. Someone all in earnest asked me, you mean to tell me 605 people lose their life in this country? Looking to me for answers, of course. And it occurred to me while the question was being put, from the wisdom says, he who bows down, humbles himself, and pray. To he who does those things, the answers will come long before the questions. So while the questioner was raising the question, the answer came. And I said in response, but did you know that it is we of the same population, for the most part, because you could have hitmen from outside pass through. That happens too. But it is we who killed we.
Correct.
It's a very, very complex issue, you know. And while we are trying to help people in disaster, there are those who make problems and trouble around it too for you, you know. So we signed the MOU and we're sharing information and we're trying to tidy it up, and that work goes on. The ODPM, as a coordinating agency, also knows what the Defense Force capability is, the engineer battalion, what its resources are, what the fire service has, what the police service has. And therefore, when the need arises, it can call on the respective state agencies to bring to bear those resources to deal with the issue. The agencies from public utilities play a very critical role. WASA, because water supply is disrupted, floods go down into the water purification processes, corrupted. What they call, there's a word for it where muddy water go down there. I can't remember. I spent a little time in public utilities, but
sediment.
I know sediment. It's sediment, but there's a particular name for it, and it makes water production potable water, not portable. Potable water for consumption and for cooking and so on. Difficult to produce in those circumstances, so you start having a water problem. And then if you have sewage systems, some could get overloaded. If you have cesspits in certain areas, they erupt. And you now find that the Ministry of Housing has an agency called the East Port of Spain Development Company, which is involved in the Laventille area, East Port of Spain largely, eradication of cesspits, because this is something we knew when we were children. Most of us have now moved, but there are still a number of cesspits around, and when you have these disasters, they make themselves very present. So we are working on that as another problem-solving effort, and that is ongoing, to convert them to proper sewer systems.
Modern-day sewer system.
Right. And of course, the public utilities, sometimes trees down poles and electrical cables, and deal with interfere with our capacity to generate electricity. So all of these agencies are within the sphere of the ODPM's coordination in a disaster. And talking about the cables and so on, we saw recently, before we had to put a brake and a stop on the scrap iron theft, and the conversion of state assets, valuable state assets, water pumps from WASA, oil and gas installation pumps to generate money for this country, radio masts and so on for your broadcast, whether they're up at Cumberland Hill or wherever. they had started to steal those. And of course, we had to put a brake on that, and we took the action that the country knows that we have taken. They even started going subterranean, underground, to pull out fiber and what they thought was cable so that they could get to. So there's a national security component in all of this. Yeah. The ODPM manages these disasters in the way I've described. But I'm just telling you some of those little side shows to let you understand that the business of governing a country, especially Trinidad and Tobago, is not easy. So I forgive them when they stop in their ignorance and say the Minister of National Security this, or the Prime Minister this, or them police this, and them. Many times the people who speak that way don't understand the difficulties that some of us create.
And you know, Minister,
as we try to solve our problem.
Before we move on to the situation, I want to comment. I've always wanted to say this, and I think this is a golden opportunity to do so now that we're speaking about the ODPM. I would like to commend Minister Sinanan and Major General Rodney Smart for warding off or staying calm when they were accosted, when they visited the bamboo settlement. And you remember how nasty that was. And Minister Sinanan kept one expression on his face, and so too the Major General. And it's not easy being around a mob. You could be how strong you are. You see that mob? It's not easy facing a mob and walking away, unscathed. And I want to thank them for keeping their cool, despite of people being in their faces. And I don't know, you saw that clip, I'm sure.
I saw it.
And it was really a terrible time for them.
It reminded me of an experience I had in 2018 when I went to
Right.
one area in my constituency and met a handful of paid UNC, bad-behaved, little reckless souls, and who insulted and disrespected me in the way that they did. And when I saw that of which you have just spoken, it reminded
you
me of that.
Yeah.
And I kind of reacted at a personal level violently too. I kind of behaved differently when I felt this water on my back, and I understood the implications of it. In order to get out of the reach of the kicking of that water, I ran ahead.
Yes.
And of course, there were people in this country who celebrated that. Now, of course, the two guys were arrested and charged who did it, and one pleaded guilty. So it was a criminal act, an assault upon me, when I went there on my own, without security, to help the people in a crisis. And that is what I faced. If I had reacted differently, maybe I might not be here on this chair talking to you this morning.
Right.
So people in Trinidad and Tobago have to understand these things. But Minister Sinanan, to his credit, he had known in advance that there was some skunkism ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
He was warned.
Is that a proper word?
It should be.
It should be.
So he prepared himself for this because he knew, notwithstanding the skunkism, that there was a need on the part of the larger public to be attended to. And to his credit, he and the ODPM went there, they disregarded the skunkism, and they got on with the business. So I will extend to him your congratulatory tone.
I saw that on TV.
I'm sure he would appreciate that. Thank you.
So the counter-trafficking unit, Minister, we now have a new director, which has been long in coming, is Dr. Samantha Chitram. And you know, there's a saying, ungratefulness is worse than witchcraft, and we have to always say thank you to people who would have served before the ones who are here now. And I would like to, Natasha and I, to say to Miss Alana Wheeler, who started the unit from ground up, and where she left it, we want to thank her for her service. She did an excellent job, and
she did.
Yes, and we want to thank her for her service. Thank you, Miss Wheeler. But now it was handed over in the interim to Mrs. Williams, who is now, Miss Kimoy Thomas, who is now Mrs. Williams.
She was the deputy director of the counter-trafficking unit.
Yes.
Until recently, they had a recruitment process.
Right.
And Dr. Samantha Chitram is now the head of the counter-trafficking unit.
The new director of the counter-trafficking unit is Miss Dr. Samantha
Chitram.
Right. And we want to, and of course, Mrs. Williams held it down, and she kept the unit together and did the work she had to do with the limited resources she had and staff. But I want to congratulate Ms. Williams on that. And now we welcome Dr. Samantha Chitram, who you will hear from in the very near future as soon as she settles into office. But CTU.
I took possession of a book that was handed over to me, edited by 3 of the professors, I think, up at the UE recently, the St. Augustine campus, on some of the new threats facing Trinidad and Tobago, a series of essays. They edited it, but a series of essays by different persons in the know, professionals in aspects of national security. One of the emergent threats is about migration in the world today. Yes. People coming in from other lands, taking space and occupying national communities. So inside of that is also the business of trafficking in human beings. They are very vulnerable migrants, and therefore they can be the subject of human trafficking. But apart from that, human trafficking is also a very sordid business, modern day slavery. Yep. So in response to this, and in consonance with action being taken internationally to deal with the scourge of human trafficking, modern day slavery, Trinidad and Tobago fell in step, and we established a counter-trafficking unit. And of course, we have a national task force, which you will know very well.
Yes.
And it works on an ongoing basis, and it is within the purview of the Ministry of National Security. So the whole business of counter-trafficking is to screen persons to ensure that they are not victims of human trafficking. Sometimes on the face of it doesn't appear so at all. You may think that these women who come here and behave and as prostitutes, you think that they have done it voluntarily or exclusively voluntarily. Yes, some of them come voluntarily. Some of them come with an intention to do that kind of business to make money. But of course, in the middle of that, their handlers might take their travel documents, put them in places, control them, they work, they get no money for what they do, all kinds of abuse. They drug them. I mean, one young lady you had on your program said she was kept in some place close to the sea. Mm-hmm. Sure, and they heard the Coast Guard was in the zone. They didn't go on that trip. You remember the young lady?
Yes, Maria.
Fortunately, on the first day, she was put in skimpy clothes and sent downstairs to meet a bunch of roaring, enthusiastic customers. That was the day that the police service was in the zone, inside of their undercover officers, waiting to carry out an exercise. So she was blessed and spared. You remember that?
Yes. And a
just
very young lady.
But she left the comfort and the safety of her family's home in Venezuela. On the encouragement of some friend, in inverted commas, from Trinidad. I remember the story well.
Yes.
So these young people, they go on social media, they are very vulnerable, they're very weak, they're very, sometimes just, let me put it plainly, mindless. They take these blandishments, and she was coming to meet a friend who was already in Trinidad, and she found herself in a swirl, in a whirlwind of confusion and loss. You remember how she told you how she felt empty and lost and helpless and desperate?
Yes. Meeting a friend on Facebook, and she wanted to experience new horizons, as she said. And she took the bait and came to Trinidad.
Yeah. From a well-off family, from what I understand. So it's just, folly knows no bounds. Recklessness, mindlessness, childishness, and therefore we have to protect our children in a special way. And therefore the Child Protection Unit of the Police Service is working on that. The Ministry of Women and Gender Affairs, led by Anna Webster Roy. So I'm just showing you the business of national security, counter-trafficking, is interlinked, interlocked with so many other stakeholders. That's why we say we take a whole of government approach. Because, even housing is important. We have to liaise from the counter-trafficking unit with the Ministry of Housing to get places to put victims. Yeah. We have to, in the Ministry of National Security, grant ministers permit to allow them to stay and work in Trinidad pending the outcome of the criminal matters that they may be witnesses in. It's a very intricate, complex issue, but the work is going on.
Yes.
And that's essentially the work of the counter-trafficking unit on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago. They are engaged, just like the ODPM, in a tremendous level of public sensitization too, so that you, the public, could know when you see these Venezuelan or other women in the bar and you just find they look attractive, they may be slaves.
Yep. And not to discount either that the nasty business of trafficking happens to Trinidad and Tobago nationals as well.
Yes.
We did interview a young woman who, as a teenager, was involved in the sex trafficking business. And unfortunately, as we have mentioned, Garth, on this program, the judiciary is moving at its snail pace, and the man who was arrested for that crime is out on bail, so that matter is yet to be concluded. So we still, in terms of convictions,
in this regard,
for this crime.
in this regard, we have a number of matters. I had access to these facts only within the last 72 hours. We have a number of matters that were completed in the magistrate's court, but they are to be tried in the High Court, where indictments have been filed, and they are waiting to be dealt with in the High Court. We have a number of matters that are yet to be indicted. We have a number of matters that may have been tried in the magistrate's court, and we are now getting to some details about those. So I admit that the court process is not as swift as it should be. I addressed some of that last week in terms of action by the government, by the judiciary, by all the stakeholders to quicken the pace of justice for the obvious reasons as you have just described. But we do have that, and we are giving particular attention, and I am in a position to say, as a matter of truth, that all of the stakeholders, from the office of the DPP to the office of the Chief Justice, the judiciary that is, the police, the ministry, administration, the minister, we are very sensitized to this, and we are all engaged as I speak in taking action to make the thing more fluid and bring it to quicker and greater success, because we are mindful of it.
Yes, if I may, Minister, could you speak to how this this process will impact on our status on the trafficking in persons
At the moment,
watch list?
we are assessed like other countries by the United States Department of State. Right now, we are on a Tier 2 watch list. We are not Tier 1 or full compliance. We are on a list that says we are making efforts, great efforts, but we have not yet come to the state of full compliance. We are now at the Tier 2 watch list, and we are doing all of the things that we are doing to try to get to full compliance, and that will positively affect our record internationally and otherwise.
Folks, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we thank you very much for joining us. And as we host the Minister of National Security, who's in studio with us, again, taking us through the paces, we're going to speak now after this break. When we come up, we talk about the ministry's, focus now on 2023. If the minister has anything else to add before we go there, we will do that. Remember, those of you who are on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe while you are there, and click on that bell, and so that you'll be notified every time we go live. And as well, we want to talk about this. Bring the minister's attention to some concerns of the members of the public with a report that was done recently, or a survey, that was done recently by members of the public about the police service. So we'll ask the minister to enlighten you on that. And of course, your questions, I see we have some coming up on Facebook as well, and on the chat, Dependency I-95's chat. So we'll get to that after this break. Short man, let's go to this break. We'll be right back.
50 by 20, 50 by 25.
This is Kyron Pollard. When you play, do it the legal way. Don't bet on illegal gaming.
I can see clearly now the rain is gone.
At Guardian Group, we've seen so many of our customers achieve great things. So, it's no surprise that after 175 years, our optimism is stronger than ever. Because when you've partnered with people to achieve their best lives as long as we have, you tend to see the world a little brighter every day. Guardian Group. Live easy.
Morning. Listen now. I've noticed something about them new people and them up the road there. Where's that? Girl, the man that he passing up and down in front of here with a set of woman.
I really noticed some woman living there, And they can't even say as much as good morning.
Well, listen now. I wonder if it's human trafficking. You think it's that?
So, how can you spot and identify perpetrators and victims of trafficking? Many victims are found living and working together in the same place and sleep in shared and inappropriate spaces. Victims work excessively long hours. They often sleep in the daytime and work long nights. They are often escorted everywhere they go and may appear to be malnourished. They may show signs of physical abuse, drug and alcohol use, and may also appear withdrawn, fearful, or intimidated. Victims who are migrants are often not in possession of their identity or immigration documents and have irregular immigration status. Perpetrators can be male or female and may appear to be managing or controlling the victims. And they may even at times appear to be the victim's best friend, boyfriend, or employer.
We are the counter-trafficking unit of the Ministry of National Security Trinidad and Tobago, safeguarding human life.
Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays, at 10 a.m., and exclusively, on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Eye on Dependency, and of course we are speaking with the Honorable Fitzgerald Hinds, Minister of National Security. Nice Sunday morning conversation, some interesting info, and I hope you are enjoying and tuned in. And please put in your questions for the Minister in the chat, either on Facebook or YouTube, and we will be opening the lines very shortly.
Speaking of noteworthy initiatives, Minister, the Drug Council, the National Drug Council, they had
the
some...
National Drug Council is one of the agencies within the purview of the Ministry of National Security. And, of course, it was established back in 2000, in July of 2000. Its primary responsibility is to monitor and evaluate the progress made during the implementation of the National Anti-Drug Plan, because we do have a recently cabinet settled, approved National Drug Plan and a strategy for going forward. And it says the implementation of the National Anti-Drug Plan relative to both demand and supply reduction and to make appropriate recommendations. The Drug Council's function also includes to advise the government on all related sectoral plans and budgets for implementation of projects, programs, and interventions in the plan. And it serves as a point of contact between demand and supply reduction sectors locally, regionally, and in the hemisphere. So this